it's a beautiful day. Lucky that we live Hawaii. 24/7, 365. Swimming in the ocean anytime. Take a leap, live healthy. Eat well. A, be active. P, live mono every day.
Take a little bike ride.
Aloha kako, and welcome to another episode of Foundations for Healthy Generations, a show for and about public health issues in Hawaii. I'm Janice Okubo, the Communications Director for the Hawaii State Department of Health, and I'll be your host today while Laura Lynn is on break. Today we'll be talking about a critical part of our department called the Hazard Evaluation and Emergency Response Office. The office responds to emergencies in Hawaii 24/7. They deal with contamination, toxic releases, oil spills. They work every day to protect the health of the people, of the land, of the air, of the sea in Hawaii. And today, our special guest is Dr. Keith Kawaoka. Keith Kawaoka is the chief of the Hazard Evaluation, or HERE office. And welcome, Keith, to our show.
Thank you, Janice.
Well, I'm really excited to talk with you about the activities for your program. But first, I want to find out a little bit about your background and what brought you to public health.
Well, I am born and raised in Hawaii. As a student, I was always interested in science to a certain extent. And growing up during high school, I guess I started with the environmental movement. And it was a period where I felt, well, I could combine science and protecting the environment and also the health of the public. So that's how I embarked on going into basically a career all my life in public health and in more specifically environmental health.
Mm-hmm. What is it about your work that really excites you, that you're really passionate about?
Well, I think there could be no greater goal than to basically protect the public health and the environment. If we don't have either one, we really can't exist. And on a day-to-day basis, we get to do that, both from an emergency standpoint, but also a long-term standpoint. So I feel good about the responsibilities that we have and the people that we have doing it.
Well, that's wonderful. Tell us a little bit about your recent activities and some of the things that your office has been doing recently.
Well, as you said, our main responsibility is to support the first responders. Even though we're not the first responders for the state, the counties are doing that. We provide technical assistance to the first responders. We are the state representative for responding to chemical and oil spills in the state. So if there is a need that a particular incident needs to be taken over by the state, we are that representative.
So you deal with a lot of coastal debris, things that wash up on the beach, different types of contamination. What are some of the other things that you've done responding to when unusual items wash up? You have to do an investigation and decide what to do with that piece of that tank or piece that is washed up.
We do all of those. We do that on a 24/7 basis. We never know what we'll be notified to respond to. As you mentioned, we could be responding to marine debris, whether it's from the tsunami debris or just falling off a ship. A cylinder could be, a gas cylinder could be washed off on the shore. We usually would get called for that. We also get involved with other types of emergency responses, either a chemical spill like a mercury spill or acid spill. We also get called for that too. We respond both from an emergency standpoint, but also from a long-term standpoint where there was known contamination on the land, and we get involved in doing that cleanup as well.
So recently there was a huge molasses spill into Honolulu Harbor. What did you guys think when you got that call about the molasses spilling into the harbor?
Well, September of this year was a very memorable month for all of us, I think. And molasses is not necessarily commonly known as a chemical contaminant or a pollutant, but in this case it was. Over 230,000 gallons of molasses spilled into the harbor. But when it first happened, we really didn't know what it was. And when we got the first notification, we went out both with our fellow program, the Clean Water Branch, and the Coast Guard, and Department of Transportation, and Department of Land and Natural Resources to see what was the extent of the problem. And we took some samples the first day that we got notified. And later that evening, we actually went out, the deputy director and my staff went out and looked at the scene to survey what the situation was.
And there was tremendous media attention to that. That was an incredibly high-profile issue. I mean, everyone was paying attention. You had multiple agencies that were coming together. How did you coordinate those agencies? How did you get everybody together to work together on that?
Well, you played a big part of that, Janice. You know, without your assistance, I think coordinating the media, which was, like you said, a very topical subject for a couple of weeks, even to this day, there's still some media attention to it. But you're right. You know, I think we could not have done this without the cooperation of the various agencies involved on the state level and the federal level, and the result was over 100 people were involved in this response from beginning to end, and everyone did their part and worked together as a team, and I think we had a very credible response that we participated in for the Molasses Spill.
And you use something called an Incident Command, or ICS system, at a special place, the Clean Islands Council. Can you talk a little bit about that coordination through the Incident Command system?
Sure. The Incident Command System, ICS, is basically a systematic tool that's used for emergency response. It's an accepted tool that's nationwide, basically, that the Department of Homeland Security on down to the first responder utilizes for any kind of incident, whether it's large or small. And it's a way to get coordination and cooperation and command control of the various resources at various levels for an incident like the Molasses Spill. So we used certainly the ICS. It came in very handy to coordinate all that response. And like I said, it's very difficult when you have over 100 people involved in the response to have a coordinated type of response to an incident like this.
And so that Clean Islands Council, how does that work, that facility?
The Clean Islands Council is basically a consortium of both public and private organizations. Department of Health is part of it, but also federal, like the Coast Guard and other agencies. Private companies are involved, oil companies, utility companies are involved in the Clean Islands Council. They have a facility on Sand Island Road to deal with basically oil spills for response, but because of that facility is just made for incident response, we decided to utilize that as an incident command post. And I can't say enough about the facilities at the Clean Islands Council. Kim Beasley and his people do a great job of maintaining that facility. So we utilize that as a command post in our second week of the response.
And with so many agencies and such a complex response, how do you keep up that working together atmosphere and that rapport with all of these multiple federal, state, county agencies that you work with?
It's not easy. When you have an emergency incident, not much unlike the Molasses Spill, but any kind of an emergency, when you have people coming in to work on a specific incident, one saying was you don't exchange business cards at the incident. You do that prior to that, either through exercises or training or just on a day-to-day basis. My people deal with first responders almost on a daily basis, so they know each other very, very well. So when there's a real incident, no matter how big or small, they know each other, that they can communicate real well. And communication is the key in this kind of incident.
So they work with fire, police, military as well?
Absolutely, all of those. And depending on the situation at hand, it would start basically with a first responder, like a fire hazmat at a county level. And if the incident does get larger and escalates, then we would get called in. And if it gets larger than that, we would call our federal assets to provide assistance as well. So depending on the situation or the incident, a number of different agencies will get involved in a particular incident management.
And so your staff is on call 24/7, so respond to all kinds of emergencies, day or night, weekend, morning, evening. But in addition to that, you all sort of seek out risk issues and contaminated areas in order to do those cleanups as well. Can you talk a little bit about that, some of your efforts there?
Sure. We have a very tireless crew. As you meant, for the emergency side, they are involved on a 24/7 basis. They never know what to expect at any one time, but they have to be prepared and ready. From the longer term side, more the chronic end, there is known contamination that we have in the islands from historical contamination. And a number of these sites are, again, from the small to the large. You know, we could have a contamination that's discovered at a small gas station, for example, or an abandoned field, and it could go the way out to, say, a large type of contamination, say at Honolulu Harbor or Pearl Harbor. So depending on the specific contamination site or area, it can involve a number of different agencies involving with our staff.
Mm-hmm. And you've worked to uncover these pesticide mixing areas at old plantation sites, and that's on many of the neighbor islands, done some work there to make sure those communities, those residential communities, are safe.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, as you know, Hawaii has had a long history of agricultural cultivation, especially for sugar and pineapple cultivation. And as those industries have declined through the years, mills and agricultural fields have shut down. But it's left what we call legacy contamination, particularly from pesticides and fungicides that have remained in the land and in the water all these years. So we made an effort in our site discovery program to look at these past operations and see if there's any kind of residual contamination in these areas. And we found some in all of the islands, basically.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. You and I understand that you also work very closely with the communities that get affected by these areas. I mean, I can just imagine learning that you live near one of these areas or in one of these areas, how fearful you might be, and I'm sure your staff has to go in there and meet with the community and discuss things with them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, if you found that, you know, you're living near or on a contaminated site, you would be very concerned for your health and as well as your neighbors, and, you know, what the potential impact could be. So when we do investigations of these sites, we definitely do a public outreach to the community. We try to meet as a group with the community, have outreach meetings with the community. We've actually had some meetings where the director and our deputy director have gone out and met with the public. We also try to meet one-on-one with the specific impacted residents that, you know, may have discovered suddenly that you have a contaminated site that you've been living on for a number of years. So it's not just the scientific investigations that we do, but we also try to deal, you know, as best we can with the community to try to, you know, answer their concerns and, you know, their what are they going to do with their property, because not just the public, their health, but also, you know, property values and the community as a whole. So that's a very integral part of our response efforts.
So on one of the islands, I know there was different homes and also a preschool involved, and so you guys have to take extra precautions with that type of situation, right?
Right. That particular incident involves the Kilauea Kauai site, where the Kilauea Sugar Company basically folded in the 70s, I believe. Ground set fallow for quite a while until development started to encroach around the area, and lo and behold, in the 80s and later, residential houses were built right on the mill site itself. So again, like I said, with our site discovery program for past agricultural activities, we found that a pesticides mixing site, which a lot of these activities, that's probably what we call the hot spots of contamination. So we make a conscious effort to see whether there's any past mixing operations going on. And we did find one right near the mill, or right adjacent to the mill, that lo and behold right now is in the heart of a residential area. So with confirmation sampling that we did find fairly high levels of both dioxin and arsenic on the site. And yes, there was a child daycare center nearby, so we made a conscious effort to sample those areas too. Fortunately, that facility was not impacted with that kind of level of contamination, but it was close enough that we did have to talk with the facility managers about that, as well as the residential owners as well. Yeah.
So just a tremendous amount of expertise and knowledge within your staff to be able to look for these things and be proactive enough to seek out these types of areas and try to correct them to ensure that people are safe. I understand there's another part of your program called the Brownfields Program that you also do this sort of removing contamination from lands to make them available to people, to make them productive, to be able to develop them. Can you talk a little bit about the Brownfields Program?
The Brownfields Program is a nationwide program from the Environmental Protection Agency. Basically, it looks at formerly contaminated sites, particularly in urban areas that had probably some activity, industrial or commercial activities that did or possibly could have contamination on that site. What the Brownfields does is facilitates the investigation and cleanup of those sites so that it can be returned to more beneficial and practical use. Return that to a more appropriate use, and actually put that back on the tax rolls as well. So it's been a very popular program nationwide. We've had some on each of the islands to look at from Brownfields standpoint. So it's been a very successful program for us. We've actually sponsored through the years what we call Brownfield Forums, where we actually invite the public, particularly developers, consultants, banks, to look at exchanging information about particular sites and what kind of programs there are to facilitate looking at those sites and hopefully possibly cleaning them up for productive use.
So you all invite businesses to come in and partner with you to work out some of these issues to try to make lands usable again.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think our main message to the community, particularly those kinds of parts of the community, is to come in early and talk to us, because we have quite a bit of information already in our information database that either the site may have been investigated or surrounding area may have been investigated that could impact upon how they decide whether they want to develop the site and how they want to develop the site. So our message has always been to come talk to us early. We'll sit down and see what we have and what they envision their potential land use is going to be. So it's a lot better than trying to develop the property and then discovering later that you have contamination in the site, and either there might be a building already on there or they're pretty close to finalizing development plans, and we don't get to be too late at that point. So we always tell them to come in early as possible to talk to us.
Well, that's so impressive about the number of areas that you all cover and the different areas statewide. I mean, every island that you're involved in. Can you talk a little bit about some of the more interesting maybe responses that you've done in the past? I know there have been oil spills, other types of chemical spills. Do you have any interesting stories for us about things that have occurred?
Well, nothing can top the Molasses Spill, but I'll try. No, the HERE office gets involved in quite a bit of both large and small incidents, and it's been a variety of types of contamination. We've had mercury spills that affected a whole community. We've had the marine debris issue that not only we get involved, but our radiation team gets involved in making determination whether whatever gets washed on shore is safe or not. We also get involved with the VOG situation in the Big Island. That has been probably our longest ongoing response, because the VOG situation, as you know, has affected the Big Island community, if not the whole state, in terms of potential sulfur dioxide issues related to the community there. So we've been involved with quite a bit of variety of responses. Like I said, we never know what we may encounter on a day-to-day basis, but I feel very confident that our staff can meet those challenges.
Does the HERA office face any challenges with federal budget issues or limited resources?
Like many programs within the Environmental Health Administration, we have had declines in our federal budget. And as you know, with the federal government the way it is, that's what's been happening the last few years. Also, our office relies quite a bit on what we call the Environmental Response Revolving Fund, which basically is a tax on oil imports into the state. And as you know, we import most of our energy resources from the state into the state. So we have seen a decline in that kind of revenue as well. So all around, I think the walls are getting kind of closed in, where revenues are getting less and less, and we're trying to find out alternative ways to deal with that matter. But I think at no point at this point we have not, held back on our response efforts overall, both from an emergency standpoint and our long-term cleanup standpoint. But it is a challenge. It is a year-to-year challenge that we go to legislature and request some additional funding. But our key is we need to maintain a readiness response for any kind of a potential incident or a cleanup.
And I know your staff, they are so incredibly committed and dedicated. I mean, you must be so proud of your staff and the activities they do and their commitment every day.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, this group has been around for quite a number of years. They've seen quite a different types of variety of responses, incidents, cleanup. I have a very good staff made up of different types of scientists, toxicologists, risk assessors, from bachelor's degree all the way up to PhDs. But they work as a team, and really to solve environmental problems requires a multidisciplinary approach. So not any particular type of science background, solves the issue. It requires a teamwork approach. And that's what we try and foster within our group, as well as within the whole environmental health program as well.
Is this profession something that you'd recommend to science majors that, maybe they look into, students at the university look into this type of work in the future?
Oh, I think so. I think, what we've encountered through the years, it will continue. We would have a lot of candidates come through from the University of Hawaii School of Public Health, but when that program folded, we did see a lot less potential candidates coming through. But we are also always looking for qualified candidates to fill our various positions, as well as the other programs as well. So I think it serves well for potential students trying to determine what they want to do with their life, professional life, to look into an area of environmental health and environmental protection.
Well, I think we are running out of time here, but is there anything else you'd like to add or mention about the HERA office, or, just some perspectives you have to offer to our audience?
I think just that we live in an island state, and given that we are separated by miles and miles of ocean, and any help that we can get, which are there, we won't see it right away. So I think the public needs to be aware that our environment is fragile, and any kind of spills or releases into the environment is going to damage the environment. So I think the public, both individually and the community, needs to be aware of that and recognize that whatever damage that is done or potentially could be done may not be undone quickly. So I think an awareness of the public and making sure that they protect the environment themselves. We can't do it ourselves.
Well, Keith, thank you so much for joining us. It was just really fascinating to hear about the facets of your program and how they protect people every day, everybody throughout the state. I mean, we should be just so reassured having your staff there to respond to these issues and to protect the environment. Would you consider coming back again, do another show?
Sure, Janice. Be glad to.
Great. Okay, well, that wraps up another episode of Foundations for Healthy Generations. Thank you for joining us today. Be well and a hui ho.
Gotta get up, it's a beautiful day. Lucky that we live Hawaii. 24/7, 365. Swimming in the ocean anytime.